Hello and welcome back. Today we have a very exciting topic. I'm going to be talking to you about the first minute. So initially engaging with our client using a video teleconferencing platform. Now, a lot of research has been done on the first minute of interactions. In general, people typically develop their opinions about you within the first 60 seconds that they're going to meet you. Now, that's not to say that we're not able to adjust our opinions or change our minds about people the more and more we get to know them. It just says that those first 60 seconds of interacting with someone really play a strong part in what our feelings are about someone. And while that might seem like a lot of pressure, ooh, 60 seconds, we got to make a really good impression. There are definitely some tricks and techniques and tips that you can use that will, maybe set the stage for them to feel really comfortable with you, for them to appreciate you, to want to engage in this helping relationship. So for the lecture today, we are going to talk about three things. So three ways that we can kind of encourage people to really feel comfortable with us in those first 60 seconds. The first thing we're going to talk about is your physical environment. So how do we set up our office space to be most conducive to, again, making someone like us or feel really comfortable in our presence? That includes things like our actual physical environment of the office, our camera, lighting, the sound, your position, eye contact, all of those sort of intangibles that kind of create a holistic picture of who you as the clinician really are. The second thing we're going to talk about today is verbal and nonverbal behavior. So what things can we do with our body language, with our facial expressions, with the tone of our voice that can win people over? What's the best way of communicating, specifically, again, in this environment of using teleconferencing? It's a little bit different than an in-person environment where you have more context. When you're in a teleconference setting like this, it takes a lot more kind of explicit focus on things like environment and verbal and nonverbal behavior. So that's the second thing we're going to cover. The third thing we're going to cover then is what we actually say. So what do we do in those first 60 seconds with a client? Oh. So the first thing I said we're going to talk about is setting up your office. Now, when you think of how you want someone to see you, we think, of course, we want to be professional. We want to make it look like an actual office setting. Some of us have the benefit of doing teleconferencing, video teleconferencing, or other online therapies in their actual home environment. If that's you by any chance, then make sure your home office resembles an office that a client might go into as closely as possible. It doesn't have to be sterile. You can have pictures on the walls, certainly. But at the same time, we want to convey professionalism. That's sort of the take-home message for this entire lecture, is professionalism makes people feel comfortable. Teleconferencing can be kind of an uncomfortable situation, particularly for clients who we interact with. A lot of social work clients might not have experience with video teleconferencing. They might be a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of seeing a clinician on a camera in their house. So we're going to try to do everything in our power to make them feel really comfortable and like you know what you're doing. It can be a little bit of an informal setting, being literally in someone's home and then literally in your home with these crazy cameras. So we're going to try to approximate a client experience in an office as much as possible. So make sure your space is set up in a way that looks like an office. Be mindful of what you have on the walls, what noises, what ambient sounds may be coming out of your environment. If there are people around, for example, if you have kids at home or a partner or dog even, make sure that they are in a place where they cannot interrupt your session. It might go without saying that interruptions can be a little bit distracting. So what we're going to do is limit those distractions and those interactions or those interruptions as much as possible. If we can, we want maybe some light music, nothing too dramatic, but for the most part, silence is really going to be your best friend. It creates that ambiance of, again, professionalism. So after you kind of get the feeling of where you're going to put your things, how you're going to position your computer, what your actual stuff is going to look like, and where things will be, the next step is thinking about the actual conveying of your image and your voice to the client. Okay? So lighting is your best friend. Lighting can make or break what your appearance to another person kind of comes off as. So I always recommend having as much lighting as possible. Of course, you can overdo it with the lighting, but err on the side of having more lighting than less lighting, and encourage your client to do the same thing. If you think about why we would want our client to have more lighting, you think, well, you want to make sure that you're able to see them as well as they're able to see you. Of course, in social work practice, part of our job is observing the behaviors of clients, the environments of clients. So if you have a client whose face you can't really see, whose setting and background is kind of fuzzy, encourage them to use more light so that you can watch them, and that can be part of your assessment of knowing what their facial expressions are, or if they're crying or laughing. It just gives you a better way to understand the situation and understand them holistically. So that's sound, environment, lighting. The next thing I want to talk to you about is your camera. If you're going to be doing teleconferencing, I would really recommend getting a decent camera. You can buy decent cameras online or at Best Buy, for example, for under $50. You can, of course, spend much, much more than that if you're really serious about doing this. They have all sorts of professional equipment, professional camera equipment, sound equipment, things that you might be interested in purchasing if this is a practice that you intend to do maybe long term. But when you have your camera, make sure, of course, that you are sitting in it square. You are even in the view frame. You're not kind of over too far to the left or too far to the right. You're not too close to the camera, so your face looks really weird. You're not too far from the camera, so the client can't see your facial expressions. You find that happy middle place. Now, this might take some adjusting or trying out. You'll have to figure out what's comfortable for you. So after you have your office set up, after you have your camera in place, your lighting good, your sound all kind of taken care of, the next thing you want to think about is this concept of nonverbal and verbal behaviors. In practice, it is always important for us to be aware of our verbal and nonverbal behavior, whether that is in an in-person setting or it's on a video teleconferencing setting like this. Now, the difference between the two is you have to, again, make your nonverbal and verbal behavior much more clear and explicit in an online or video teleconferencing environment. In an in-person environment, we have the luxury of context. We can see micro movements. We are able to kind of pick up on maybe energies or the intangible things or messages that we're giving back to the client and they're giving to us. But in an online environment, we lose a lot of that. We become a two-dimensional image. So everything we do, in addition to being very professional, needs to be very deliberate. If you want to convey concern, really focus on what a facial expression of concern would look like and look directly into the camera. You might have had the experience before where someone is trying to talk about something heavy or something interesting, and the person on the other end of the camera, you see them like looking all over, or maybe you see them like down here on Facebook, not really making eye contact. They're clearly looking at something else on the computer. Make sure that's not you. Make good eye contact for the moments that need the eye contact. Show positive encouragement and support through a friendly, resting face. So sort of a light smile, but certainly not too smiley. In our attempts to be professional, we want to make sure that we're not coming across I don't know, too bubbly or optimistic or really just unprofessional in any way, shape, or form. The idea is we want to be confident, professional, and comfortable because that's what's going to make your client comfortable. And that's what's going to get them to buy into this kind of weird process, right? So your nonverbal and verbal behavior needs to be very clear, very deliberate, and very professional. All right, so that covers our setting up the environment. That covers our verbal and nonverbal behavior. Now the exciting part, what the heck we actually do and say in those first 60 seconds. So to set up the stage, what's gonna happen is you'll turn on your computer, you'll be ready, you'll have your notes in front of you, the other person will join the meeting or join the private chat session that you've created previously ahead of time. And the light will go bing because they're on, and you'll go and freeze a little bit. At least if you're anything like me, you'll kind of freeze a little bit. Maybe you've done this a time or two and you're a little more comfortable in front of the camera. But there are certain things that, again, you can do in those first 60 seconds that you can say that should be in your tool bag. This should be the way that you open up every client interaction the first time that you meet them. Are you ready? Ready, go. Okay, so for the first 60 seconds, what we do, first, we start out by introducing ourselves. So, hello, my name is Dr. Jamie Clem, and I will be your clinician for this experience. It's probably a good idea to tell them a little bit about yourself. Remember, their nerves are going to be high, your nerves are going to be high. You want to take a little bit of time to kind of just get the ball rolling. Talk very briefly about who you are and what your role is at the agency, and maybe a little bit about what they can expect going into this process. Demystify anything that they could possibly be mystified about. We're going to try to make them feel comfortable and safe. So telling them what they can expect throughout the next 8, 10, 12 sessions, that's going to kind of get them in a place of, all right, well, this is what's happening. I'm not really nervous anymore. I feel less scared and more prepared for the process. So introducing them, telling them what to expect. And then, of course, the most important thing that we have to do in any initial meeting with a client is go over the idea of confidentiality. Now, we need to do this right up front with a client, typically before we even start chatting with them, because the idea is if they don't know what the kind of limits to confidentiality are, there's a chance that they might say something that could potentially be something that would be outside of the scope of confidentiality. So you really want to make sure that you get confidentiality in there. So it's introduce yourself, and then tell them what to expect, and then confidentiality. And of course, at the end of confidentiality, make sure you check in with them. So, did you understand everything that I just said? Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything else that I can clarify for you? Put the ball in their court. Let them kind of have a moment to get things sort of sorted in their mind and to let the process kind of sink in. Then after that, you can start. So and so. What brings you here today? Why is it that you were interested in chatting with me? Or whatever your kind of first line is. So that's it. You can set up your office to be professional, but still maybe somewhat warm and inviting. We want to use very clear, professional, nonverbal, and verbal behavior. And then in the first minute, we want to make sure that we demystify the process, explain what's going to happen, and make them feel comfortable being there. That's it. Those are the tips and tricks you can do to win somebody over in a video teleconferencing environment. Good luck!